I still remember the thrill of getting my car, the one I'd worked so hard for. It wasn't just a car to me. It was a symbol of everything I had sacrificed for. My name is Lena, and I was 22 when I went abroad to study in Germany. I had spent years working part-time jobs, saving every penny, and making the tough choice to skip social events. But it was all worth it when I finally bought my dream car. It was sleek, fast, and mine. I had parked it in my parents' driveway before I flew off, feeling secure that they'd take care of it. I even asked them to start it occasionally to keep the battery from dying. They assured me everything would be fine, but nothing could prepare me for what happened next. One day, while I was in Germany enjoying my exchange program, I got a message from Jake, my best friend back home. The text made my heart race. "Did you sell your car?" I frowned at my phone. "What?" "No," I replied quickly, thinking it was some kind of prank. Jake sent me a screenshot of a Facebook marketplace listing. My stomach dropped. It was a photo of my car, my exact car, with the same model and license plate listed for sale. The price was ridiculously low. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Why was it for sale? I immediately called my parents, praying it was some kind of mistake. My dad answered, his voice casual as always. "Hey, Lena. How's Germany?" he asked. I barely let him finish before I snapped. "Why is my car listed for sale?" There was a long pause, and then my mom picked up the phone. Her voice was annoyingly sweet, like she was trying to calm me down. "Oh, honey, don't overreact. It's no big deal. No big deal. That's my car," I said, feeling my anger rise. "You didn't ask me. What's going on?" That's when they hit me with it. "Well," my mom began, as if explaining something totally reasonable. "Your cousin Ella got into some financial trouble. She needed help paying off her debts, and you weren't using the car anyway, so we sold it for her." I could feel my blood boiling. "You sold my car to pay off Ella's debt?" I almost couldn't believe it. Ella. My cousin, the one who had never had to lift a finger to get anything. The same Ella who got a new car as a graduation gift, while I spent years working for mine. My mind raced. "Who did you sell it to?" I demanded. A long silence stretched before my dad muttered, "Some guy named Mark." I hung up the phone before they could say anything more. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I planned. I wasn't going to let this slide. I sat there in my small apartment in Germany, heart pounding. I couldn't understand what had just happened. My parents had sold my car, my dream car, without even asking me. And for Ella, my cousin, who had never once worked for anything in her life, this was it. The moment when I realized how little my parents really saw me. They never saw me as their daughter, as someone they were supposed to care for. To them, I was just a backup plan, someone they could exploit whenever it suited them. I wasn't going to let this slide. I messaged Jake immediately. "Find out everything you can about this Mark guy. Where does he live? Who is he? I need to know everything." Jake was quick to respond. Within minutes, I had some details about Mark Reynolds. He was a used car dealer in our hometown. This made sense. He probably saw my parents as an easy target, desperate, low on options, and willing to sell anything to get some quick cash. He'd probably figured out that my parents were in a tight spot and offered them a bargain price. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't going to let him keep my car. I kept my head cool, even though inside my emotions were racing. I wasn't about to lose this battle, not after everything I had worked for. The next step was simple. I pulled up my phone and called the DMV. After confirming my identity, I explained the situation. The woman on the other end of the line sounded skeptical at first, but when I emailed her a copy of the title with my name on it, her tone shifted. "Sir, you need to file a police report immediately. The car is still legally yours." My car was stolen. The realization hit me like a truck, and with that knowledge, I took my next step. I hung up the phone and immediately dialed the local police department back home. I wasn't messing around. "Hi, I need to report a stolen vehicle. My parents sold it without my permission. The title is still in my name." There was a moment of hesitation on the line, and then the officer said, "Do you have proof you didn't authorize the sale?" I had anticipated this. "I've got text messages from my parents admitting they sold it, and I've got the title. I can email it to you right now." A couple of hours later, I received a call back from Detective Harris. "Based on the documents you sent, you have a pretty strong case. Since you never signed over the title, the sale wasn't legal. The car is still yours." I exhaled in relief. This wasn't over yet, but at least I had the law on my side now. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. I sat in my tiny apartment, scrolling through my phone, waiting for anything that would give me the next step. I wasn't about to let my parents or Mark think they could get away with this. I had already called the police, and now it was time to watch everything unfold. But what I hadn't expected was the intensity of it all. My phone buzzed at least a dozen times in the span of an hour. It was Jake again, and this time, he had some interesting news. Lena, I found Mark Reynolds. He owns a used car lot in town. Looks like he got a pretty good deal from your parents. Probably figured out they were desperate and lowballed them for an easy flip. My stomach twisted. Of course he did. Mark was no stranger to the business of buying and selling cars, and he probably saw my parents as an easy target. They were not the sharpest when it came to dealing with money or business. He probably saw them as weak, cornered, and willing to do whatever it took to get out of their own financial trouble. And now, he had my car, but I wasn't going to let him keep it. I smiled to myself as I put my phone down. Mark didn't realize it yet, but I was about to make this much more difficult for him. The fact that he was a used car dealer meant that there was a paper trail. This wasn't just some casual sale. I knew I could use that to my advantage. I called Detective Harris once again. Detective, I've got something for you. Mark Reynolds is the guy who bought the car. He owns a used car lot. That means there's probably paperwork with his name on it, and the sale wasn't legitimate. Harris's voice was calm, but there was an undertone of excitement in it. All right, Lena, this is good. We'll start by tracking down that paperwork. Let's see if Mark will cooperate. If he knows he bought stolen property, he may want to return it before this goes any further. I hung up the phone feeling a little lighter. I knew I was getting closer, but as the hours passed, I began to wonder, what if Mark didn't want to return the car? That thought hit me as I sat staring at the small, chipped desk in my room. I had never dealt with something like this before. I knew my rights, but I didn't know if Mark would just give in. What if he tried to charge me for the car, or make it even more difficult? This wasn't just a matter of getting my car back anymore. It was a matter of standing up for what was mine. I wasn't about to let this slide. Not this time. The phone rang again, this time with an unknown number. I answered quickly, bracing myself for the worst. Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Is this Lena? The voice on the other end was gruff, annoyed. Yes, who's this? I asked. It's Mark Reynolds. We've got a problem. His tone was sour, as if he already knew that things weren't going to end well. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of problem? There was a long pause on the other end before Mark finally spoke again. The cops just showed up at my dealership. They're saying the car I bought from your parents is stolen. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected it to happen so soon, but here we were. The detective had come through. Oh, that's crazy, I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. How did that happen? Mark's irritation was evident in the way he responded. Well, your parents told me they had permission to sell the car, but now the cops are saying it's stolen, and they're telling me I've got to give it back. I leaned back in my chair, a smirk tugging at the corners of my lips. Well, Mark, I said sweetly, I don't know what to tell you. I'm afraid you don't own that car. My parents didn't have the legal right to sell it, and now you're going to have to return it. There was a long silence. I could almost feel the weight of his thoughts on the other end of the line. Look, Lena, he finally said, I've already put some work into it detailing it. Small repairs. I'm at over $8,000 in costs. If you want the car back, I need that money. I nearly laughed. Really? This guy was trying to extort me over my car? The audacity? $8,000? For what? You want me to pay for work on a car that's legally mine? I said, not hiding the sarcasm in my voice. I'm not paying you a dime, Mark. You're getting the car back, and that's all. He let out an exasperated sigh. I'm not running a charity here, Lena. You want your car back. You pay up. I kept my voice calm. You want me to pay for my own stolen car? I'm not doing that. The car is coming back to me, and you're not getting a penny. Mark's voice hardened. You don't get to tell me how this works. I paid for that car, and now you're telling me I can't even make my money back? Let me think about it, I said, and then I hung up. This wasn't over. I sat in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. It was surreal. My parents had stolen my car from me, sold it without asking, and now I was in a fight with some used car dealer who was trying to scam me for more money. But I wasn't about to back down. This was my car, and I was going to get it back. I picked up my phone again, and this time I called Detective Harris. The line was busy for a moment, But then he answered, "Detective Harris, it's Lena. Mark's trying to play hardball. He wants me to pay $8,000 for the car." There was a slight chuckle on the other end. "If he's trying to get money from you for something he doesn't legally own, that's extortion. We'll handle that. If he doesn't return it willingly, we'll seize it." I exhaled. It was starting to feel like I had this under control. I had a strong case, and the law was on my side. The following days felt like an intense chess match, each move calculated, each decision building toward the inevitable moment when I would finally get my car back. My parents didn't call again after our last conversation, and neither did Mark, but I could feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. They were probably hoping I'd cave in, that I'd eventually let go of the car and forgive them for selling it. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I had spent too many years working my ass off, too many hours spent busting my back in part-time jobs, and too many nights studying while my friends were out having fun. I wasn't about to let this mistake slide. Not for my parents, not for Mark, not for anyone. The phone rang again, the screen lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. I immediately picked up, expecting it to be the police or Jake with an update. But when I heard Mark's voice on the other end, I knew things were about to get interesting. "Lena, I've been thinking about your offer," Mark said, his tone smug as ever. "I'm not going to lie, this isn't going the way I expected, but I've decided I'm willing to sell the car back to you for the right price." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "What price?" "Oh, really?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "What's the price now, Mark? Last time we talked, you wanted $8,000. Are you doubling that?" A slight laugh escaped him before he responded. "Actually, I'm not going to charge you that much. I've thought it over, and if you want the car back, it's going to cost you $10,000. My stomach turned. I was no longer surprised by his audacity, but this was getting ridiculous. $10,000? Are you kidding me? Nope. I've already sunk money into it, and I'm not just handing it over for nothing." His tone was almost mocking, like he thought I would actually pay up. I paused, taking a deep breath. "Mark, you're trying to extort me. I'm not paying you a single dime for a car that is legally mine to begin with. The only reason you have it is because you got it from my parents under false pretenses, and now you want me to pay you for your mistakes?" Mark was silent for a moment, probably weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. "Look, Lena, I didn't cause this mess. Your parents sold me the car. I'm just trying to make back what I paid for it. If you want your car back, that's the price." I could feel my blood start to boil. The nerve of this guy. He wasn't even a little bit ashamed of what he was doing, but I wasn't going to play along. "I'm not negotiating with you," I said firmly. "You've got two options, Mark. You return the car, or I'll let the police handle it. You know this was a stolen car, and trying to sell it again is fraud." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're making a mistake, Lena," Mark said, his voice suddenly cold and threatening. "If you push this, I'll make sure you regret it." I smiled. The words barely fazed me anymore. "You can try, Mark, but I'm not backing down. You've already sold me my car, and now you're trying to scam me out of it again. That's not how this works." I hung up before he could say anything more. The ball was in his court now, and I knew, deep down, that I had him cornered. The next morning, I woke up to another text from Jake. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the message. "Hey, just a heads up, Mark's still trying to sell the car. He's offering a $5,000 discount to anyone willing to take it off his hands. Looks like he's getting desperate." I couldn't help but laugh. Desperate indeed. This was it. Mark was clearly losing his grip. He had overplayed his hand, and now he was trying to sell the car at a steep discount just to get rid of it. I couldn't let him off the hook that easily. I immediately called Detective Harris. "Detective, Mark's at it again," I said, my voice filled with purpose. "He's trying to sell the car again, but this time he's offering a $5,000 discount. If he's trying to flip it, he's clearly getting desperate. This is our chance." Harris was quiet for a moment before he responded. "If he's trying to sell the car without returning it, that's theft by deception. I'll have my team look into it. Keep me posted if anything else comes up." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Will do. Thanks, detective." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Mark thought he could flip the car for a profit, but I wasn't about to let that happen. The fact that he was offering such a drastic discount was the perfect opportunity to put more pressure on him. If the police could catch him trying to sell it again, he'd be in even more trouble. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. I wasn't just doing this for the car. I was doing this for myself. I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me. Not anymore. Not after everything I had been through with my parents. Later that evening, I got a call from my dad. His voice was tight with frustration when he spoke. "Lena, you need to stop this. We've been talking, and your mom and I decided we're going to pay Mark the money to get the car back. We don't want this to go any further." I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction at the sound of his voice. They were finally cracking. "That's great, Dad," I said with a calmness that barely masked the anger simmering underneath. "So, I guess you figured out the $10,000 price, right?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Not exactly," my dad muttered. "We can do $1,500. Take it or leave it." I blinked in disbelief. $1,500. That was barely enough to cover the detailing Mark had done, let alone the car itself. $1,500? For a car that's worth at least $10,000? You sold my car without asking me, and now you think $1,500 is fair? We're already going above and beyond, Lena, he said, his tone defensive. You need to take it or leave it. I felt my anger rising again. Dad, I'm not negotiating with you. This isn't about money. This is about the fact that you sold my car without my permission. And now you're asking me to accept $1,500 for it? I'm not doing that. You owe me the full amount. My dad let out a frustrated sigh. You're making this worse than it has to be, Lena. We're family. I laughed, though it was hollow. Yeah, we're family. The family that sold my dream car behind my back. Don't talk to me about family. I hung up before he could say anything else. I knew I had them cornered now. They had no way out of this. They either paid Mark the full amount or dealt with the consequences. I wasn't about to let them treat me like I was some afterthought. Not this time. Days passed, and everything seemed to slow down in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't sure if it was the tension of the situation, or if it was just that I had finally reached the point where I knew I wasn't going to let my parents or Mark get away with anything. But there was something in the air, a quiet anticipation, as if everything was building up to a single moment that would change everything. I had already made my peace with the idea that once this was over, nothing would ever be the same again. My relationship with my parents was irreparably damaged. And as much as I wanted to move on from all of this, I knew I couldn't until I had my car back. This was about more than the car. It was about respect, justice, and holding people accountable for their actions, even if those people were supposed to be the ones who cared for you most. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jake. Lena, just a heads up. Mark's trying to flip your car again. He's calling it a rare find now and asking $33,000. This guy is seriously delusional. My blood ran cold. $33,000? Mark had lost all sense of reality. He was clearly trying to take advantage of the situation, using my car as some kind of cash cow. The desperation in his pricing made it clear. He was either panicking or simply hoping I'd pay whatever it took to get my car back. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. I had already talked to Detective Harris about Mark's attempts to resell the car, and now it was time to make the final move. I wasn't going to let Mark get away with this. I wasn't going to let him scam me or anyone else. The police were on my side, and they had been gathering evidence. I had all the leverage I needed. I texted Jake, "Let the police know about the new price. I'm heading over to Mark's with them. We're putting an end to this." I knew this was going to be the hardest part. It wasn't just about getting my car back anymore. It was about making sure Mark would never be able to do this again. And, of course, there was still the matter of my parents. They had sold my car without asking me, and now they were asking me to accept far less than it's worth to make things right. I wasn't going to let that slide either. When I got the call from Detective Harris, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. He was professional as always, but I could tell he was ready for this. "Lena, we've got everything set. We'll meet you at Mark's in an hour. This is going to be handled properly." I couldn't help but smile. Finally, after all the stress, after all the waiting, it was time for action. This was no longer about emotional manipulation, guilt trips, or backdoor deals. It was about legal consequences, and Mark was going to have to face them. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. The air outside was cool, the streets bustling with people who had no idea what was happening. The world felt so normal, so unaware of the storm that was about to hit. But as I drove toward Mark's dealership, my thoughts raced. I didn't know how this was going to end, but I knew one thing. I had taken control. No matter what happened, I had finally stood up for myself, and that was something I could be proud of. As I pulled up to Mark's used car lot, I saw him pacing back and forth through the window, clearly unaware that he was about to face a much bigger problem than me. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door of the dealership. Detective Harris and a couple of officers were already there, waiting. They didn't look at me, but I could sense their calm confidence. I knocked on the door. Mark opened it, his usual cocky grin immediately fading when he saw the police behind me. Well, he sneered. If it isn't the little thief here to beg for her car back. I couldn't suppress the smirk that tugged at my lips. Not exactly, Mark. Before he could respond, Detective Harris stepped forward, flashing his badge. Mark Reynolds, you're under investigation for theft by deception. The car you purchased from Lena's parents is stolen property, and we're here to seize it. Mark's face drained of color. He backed up a few steps, his bravado crumbling. He tried to regain some composure, but it was clear he knew the game was over. Wait, no, this is all a misunderstanding, Mark stammered. Your parents told me they had permission to sell the car. They gave me the title. I've got a bill of sale. His voice was shaky now, his earlier confidence completely gone. I stepped forward, my arms crossed, watching him squirm. No, Mark, it wasn't a misunderstanding. My parents sold it without my permission. And now, thanks to you, we're all in this mess. But you're the one who's going to pay for it. Detective Harris didn't let Mark get another word in. Sir, you're being detained for possession of stolen property. We're taking the car into custody. If you resist, you'll be charged with obstruction and possibly additional charges. Mark's face twisted in frustration. You can't do this. I paid for that car. I'm not just going to hand it over for nothing. Detective Harris stepped forward, his tone no nonsense. You can make things easy and cooperate, or you can make it harder for yourself. But either way, you're not getting to keep that car. Mark's shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with anger and bitterness, before he muttered, "Fine, take it." I didn't say another word. As the officers moved in and began securing the car, one couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. The car was mine again, and Mark had no say in it anymore. He was going to face legal consequences for his actions, and my parents, well, they were going to have to reckon with the fallout from all of this too. The next few days were a blur. The police made sure everything was handled legally, and the process of transferring the car back into my name was swift. It wasn't about the car anymore, though. It was about the principle of it all, about finally standing up for myself after years of being treated like I was invisible, like my needs and desires didn't matter. I signed the final paperwork, and I finally had my car back in my possession. But as I sat in the driver's seat, I realized something. It wasn't just about the car. It was about taking control of my own life. It was about being unapologetic in my fight for what was mine. But that was the final piece of the puzzle. I didn't want anything to do with my parents anymore. They had chosen Ella, had lied to me, manipulated me, and stolen from me. That was the last straw. I made the call. The one I had known deep down was inevitable. "Mom," I said when she picked up, "we need to talk." She sighed on the other end of the line. "Lena, I know you're upset, but we've been through so much. And this? No, Mom," I cut in. "This is it. I'm done. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. You sold my car behind my back, and now you're asking me to forget it?" She was silent for a moment, but then I heard her voice shake. "Please, Lena, don't do this. We're family." "No, we're not," I said, my voice sharp. "You made your choice, and I'm making mine. Goodbye." And with that, I hung up. Story 2. I've always known that my friends and acquaintances weren't really my friends. They were just there for one thing, my family's wealth. The term trust fund kid always followed me around, like a shadow, and anyone who thought they could get close to me assumed I'd be the one throwing wild parties or picking up tabs at upscale bars. But when it became clear that I wasn't the type to indulge their expectations, they faded away, one by one. They weren't interested in me. They were just interested in what I could offer. My parents set up a trust fund for me when I was born, and I knew from a young age that I'd be comfortable. But I also knew they had worked incredibly hard for that money, and it wasn't a free ride. They taught me to be cautious with it, to treat it like something that could be easily lost if not handled carefully. I'd have to work hard to preserve it. So, after graduating college, I threw myself into expanding the family's wealth, trying my best to make smart investments and avoid pitfalls. I didn't want to be just some rich kid who blew it all away on bad decisions. Then there was Ashley. I met her when I was still in college, just starting to get a sense of how my life would look post-graduation. I wasn't the type to date casually. I wanted something real, something lasting. But as my wealth became known, the kind of people I attracted were often more interested in the lifestyle than me. I didn't really trust trust anyone, but I tried my best to be part of the world around me, attending social gatherings, making small talk, being a good host when needed. Yet, no matter how much I tried to fit in, it always felt like there was a catch. Then Ashley came along. I remember the first time we met at a friend's gathering. Unlike everyone else, she didn't know who I was or what my family had. She didn't seem interested in impressing me or playing some game. She was real. She was refreshing. We hit it off right away. For our first date, I took her to McDonald's. Not exactly a fancy place, but we had a blast. She didn't care about the simplicity of it. She just wanted to enjoy my company, and I fell for her hard. She was smart, funny, and she didn't see me as some bank account waiting to be raided. About a month into dating, I introduced her to my parents. She didn't flinch at the wealth they had, which I saw as a good sign at the time. I thought, she doesn't care about my money. Little did I know, she already had a plan of her own. But in the beginning, it was easy to overlook. She charmed my parents, won them over with her manners, her elegance. They loved her, and I was smitten. She was the first serious girlfriend I'd ever introduced to them, and they were thrilled to see me so happy. We dated for a year, and throughout that time, Ashley never once asked for expensive gifts or even suggested I spend money on her. I was starting to think I had found something genuine. After a year, I proposed, and she said yes without hesitation. She had secured her place in my family, and my parents were beyond happy for us. She even told them she wanted to continue working after we married, which my mother appreciated. It was clear that Ashley didn't want to live off my wealth. She was going to contribute herself. She worked in tech and had a decent income, which I admired. On our second anniversary, my parents hosted a party where they made a big announcement. They wanted Ashley to be added as a beneficiary to my trust fund, alongside me. My parents were so proud of her, and they introduced her to Bob, the accountant who managed the trust. It was official. Ashley was now a part of the family's financial future. What I didn't realize at the time was that Ashley wasn't just charming my parents to secure a place in the trust, she was also securing her position in something much darker. While I was busy working and focusing on the business, she was traveling frequently for work, and I later found out that she was often traveling with Bob, the accountant. They were having an affair. I remember seeing them talking at parties, laughing together, but I was so blinded by love that I never suspected a thing. 7 years went by. It felt like I had the perfect life, a successful business, a loving wife, and everything I could want. Then tragedy struck. My parents passed away just 6 months apart. I was devastated. The grief hit me harder than I expected, and I threw myself into the business to avoid the emotional pain. But during this time, I started noticing changes in Ashley. She became distant, cold even. At first, I thought she was just grieving in her own way. But as weeks went by, I realized she never once asked how I was doing. She never once brought up my parents' death. It felt strange, but I blamed myself. Maybe I hadn't opened up enough to her. Then, 2 weeks after the funeral, I decided to leave work early and surprise her. I bought pink roses on the way home, thinking maybe we could talk and reconnect. But when I unlocked the door to our house, I was greeted with an unimaginable sight. Bob was standing in my living room, and Ashley was there holding 2 suitcases. My heart sank as she looked at me and said, "I wanted to do this quietly. I was going to leave you a note, but I guess we'll have to do this face to face. I'm leaving. I'm moving in with Bob. After our vacation in Italy, we'll finalize the divorce. Your parents made sure I'd be comfortable. Don't make that sad puppy face. Are those flowers for me? I'll take them. Bye." And just like that, she was gone. For 2 days, I didn't leave the house. I locked the blinds, ate nothing but instant noodles, and let the TV run to drown out the silence. I couldn't believe it. My wife of 7 years, the woman I had trusted, had just walked out on me like I was nothing. Then, on the 3rd day, someone rang the doorbell. I thought it was just a delivery person, but the ringing grew louder, more insistent. I didn't move, but then I heard a woman's voice shouting, "I know you're in there! Open up!" My first thought was that it was Ashley, but then I remembered she was supposed to be in Italy. So I dragged myself out of bed, opened the door, and was met by a red-haired woman in a sharp 2-piece suit. She looked furious. "Your wife ran off with my husband," she said, her tone icy. "Sitting here like a mess isn't going to fix anything. Get up, shower, and meet me in the living room in 15 minutes. We've got a lot to talk about." I couldn't process what she was saying, but the anger in her eyes made it clear that this was no random encounter. She barged into the house, wrinkling her nose at me. "You reek," she added, before telling me not to call her mom, which made me chuckle despite myself. It was the first time I felt anything other than numb since Ashley left. The woman introduced herself as Sandra, Bob's wife. She explained that she had tried to reach me for 2 days, but when she couldn't get through, she decided to show up. What she said next blew my mind. Bob had been having an affair with my wife, but it wasn't just the affair that Sandra was here for. She had uncovered something far worse. Bob had been embezzling money from my trust fund, and Ashley had been complicit in it. Sandra was relentless. She was one of those people who didn't just sit around and wallow in the mess life handed her. No, she got up and did something about it. She wasn't just angry, she was focused. That was clear as soon as she started talking. I could hardly wrap my head around what she was saying. Bob, my parents' trusted accountant, the guy who managed everything I thought was safe, had been siphoning money from the trust fund. Small amounts at first, easy to overlook. But eventually, Bob got bolder, too confident in his position. And the worst part? Ashley was helping him. She wasn't just caught in the affair. She was actively participating in stealing from me. Sandra had all the proof. She'd done her homework, gone through Bob's computer, found messages, found records. She even had a timeline of how Bob had gradually drained funds without anyone noticing for a while. She wasn't here to cry about it. She was here to destroy him and Ashley, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication in that. I was in shock, but also a little numb. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Sandra even told me how she had been piecing it all together for the last few days, and I felt like I was just now catching up to the reality of what had been happening behind my back. Sandra had been just as blindsided by her husband's betrayal as I had been by Ashley's. Bob had come home, packed his things, and left without so much as a goodbye. And when Sandra started digging, she found out that Bob wasn't just leaving her for Ashley, he was robbing me blind too. The man she thought she knew had been stealing from both of us. She didn't just sit back and let it happen, though. No, Sandra was ready for a fight. The first thing she did was go through Bob's Facebook account. He kept it open on his work computer, big mistake. Once she saw the messages between him and Ashley, she started connecting the dots. From there, it didn't take long for her to figure out how far this whole scheme went. Your wife isn't innocent in this, Sandra told me, her voice hard. She knew exactly what was going on. She's not just a victim in this mess, she's a part of it, and she'll pay the price. I wanted to argue, but there was no point. Ashley had been playing me for years, and I had been too blinded by love and trust to see it. Sandra's words stung, but she was right. As much as I still wanted to believe that Ashley wasn't capable of something like this, the evidence was right in front of me. Sandra didn't waste time with hesitation. She was calm, collected, and focused on making them pay. She had been through the ringer already, but she was standing tall, ready to take action. And then she made a proposition that changed everything. I'm going to ruin them, Sandra said, her eyes cold. Bob's going to lose everything, and Ashley's going to regret ever thinking she could get away with this. I don't care what happens to me or you, but we're taking them down together. Her words didn't sound vengeful, more like a promise. It wasn't about revenge for her, it was about justice. She wasn't just going to sit back and let these two destroy everything. I'm in, I said, my voice shaky but determined. I'll do whatever it takes. We shook hands, and just like that, the plan was set in motion. Ashley and Bob had no idea what was coming. They thought they were on top of the world, that they'd managed to escape with all the money and freedom they wanted. They didn't know that their lives were about to implode. The next few days felt like a blur. I tried to focus on work, but every time I looked at my phone or checked my email, I was reminded of the mess I was in. My wife was gone. My trust fund had been stolen, and the woman I had trusted, the woman I thought I knew, was part of it all. Then, just as we were getting everything lined up, Ashley called me. I almost didn't pick up, but I felt this strange compulsion to hear what she had to say. When I answered, she started yelling immediately. Aaron, what the hell is going on? Bob says we're in trouble. Where's my money? She screamed, her voice frantic. I took a deep breath. There was no point in sugarcoating it. You mean the money my parents worked so hard to earn? The money Bob has been using to buy you gifts and pay for that apartment you moved into? Maybe you should talk to my lawyer. I was calm, collected, and surprisingly relieved. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. Before she could say anything else, I hung up. That evening, when I was leaving work, I saw Ashley standing outside, waiting for me. She was frantic, pacing back and forth. As soon as she saw me, she blocked my path. "Aaron, please. What's going on? Why isn't Bob telling me anything? This doesn't make sense. I need to know what's happening. Please," she begged, her eyes wide with panic. For the first time, I looked her straight in the eye. "I've heard from your lawyer about your divorce filing," I said. "Just so you know, you're not getting a single cent." Her face turned pale. The color drained from her skin, and I could see the panic rising in her. She never expected this outcome. She thought she could just walk away, but now she was realizing that it wasn't going to be that simple. I could feel a twisted sense of satisfaction, but it didn't last. Instead, guilt crept in. Despite everything she'd done, a part of me still loved her. And seeing her so broken, so desperate, it hurt. It was like a punch to the gut. She reached out, trying to grab my arm, her voice breaking as she shouted, "How could you do this to me?" I wanted to scream back, "How could you do this to me?" But I didn't. Instead, I just walked past her and got into my car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. There she stood, stunned, her face a mixture of disbelief and fear. Meanwhile, things were unraveling for Bob. The company fired him. His actions had tarnished the firm's reputation, and clients were pulling out left and right. It was the best move for the company to sever ties with him, but it didn't make it any less painful. Bob had brought everything crashing down around him. Sandra was on top of it all. She was in contact with the best lawyers, confident that they would win the case. She was determined to see Bob pay for what he had done, and I was more than happy to be a part of it. I felt lighter with each update I received from Sandra. I couldn't help but wonder how it had all gone so wrong. How had I been so blind to Ashley's true nature? And how had I let someone like Bob get so close to my family? The weight of everything felt heavy, but it was nothing compared to the relief of knowing that at least, for now, I was no longer at their mercy. Ashley and Bob were out there somewhere, probably still thinking they had the upper hand, unaware that the noose was tightening around their necks. But their time was running out. A week passed, and each day felt like a slow march toward the inevitable. I could see Ashley's desperation starting to show. The calls, the texts, they were all attempts to claw her way back into my life, into the position she thought she deserved. But I wasn't having it. I didn't owe her any explanations anymore. She'd already made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences. I wasn't the same guy who had trusted her with everything. Then came the second call. This time, it wasn't frantic. It was soft. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. I could almost hear the tears on the other end, but I didn't feel sorry for her. If anything, it only confirmed that she had finally realized the depth of her mistake. "Aaron," she said quietly, her voice cracking, "I know things have been bad, but can we talk? I'll come over and cook for you. I'm sorry. I want to make things right. Just hear me out." I was shocked by how quickly she had turned. The woman who once left me with nothing but a cold goodbye, who moved on so easily with my best friend and betrayed me in the worst possible way, was now asking to make things right? I wanted to laugh, but it wasn't funny. "Are you joking?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "After everything you've done, you think you can come here, cook me dinner, and pretend everything's fine?" She didn't respond right away, but I could tell she wasn't prepared for my anger. "Honey, I know things have been bad," she tried again, "but we can work through this. I want to fix this." I could feel my blood boil. "Bad? You call what you did bad?" It was cruel, selfish, evil. There was no sugarcoating it anymore. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me, like she had done for so long. The woman I once loved had turned into someone I didn't even recognize. "What's wrong with you?" I hissed. "I've spent 7 years with you, trusting you, loving you, and this is how you repay me?" She tried to downplay it, to shift the blame, but I wasn't hearing it anymore. "I don't want to see your face ever again," I said, voice cold. "You're not welcome here." I hung up, my hands shaking with the raw fury I had tried to suppress for so long. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't just angry, I was done, and it felt good. But the conversation wasn't over, not yet. Ashley called me again, her tone now laced with impatience. "I know you're just angry. We can fix this. I know I messed up, but I want to make it right," she said. "Can't you see? I was struggling. You were always away, always working. Bob brought excitement. We had something. Don't you see that?" That was when the last thread of doubt snapped. There she was blaming me for her affair, blaming me for her betrayal. She had the audacity to turn this back on me. It wasn't enough that she destroyed my life. Now she wanted to blame me for her actions. You're delusional, I snapped. This isn't about you struggling. This is about you being a cheater and a thief. If you were struggling, we could have talked about it. We could have worked through it. But instead, you chose to sleep with Bob, rob me blind, and tear everything apart. I ended the call before she could say anything else. My resolve was solid now. She wasn't going to weasel her way back in. Sandra and I were moving forward with our plan, and things were progressing fast. She'd been working with the best lawyers, pulling strings with her connections, and soon we had everything in place. The proof of Bob's embezzling was airtight. The evidence of Ashley's involvement was irrefutable. It wasn't just about ruining their lives anymore. It was about making sure they would pay for everything they had done. The next step was to confront Ashley. Sandra's idea was simple: invite her over and watch her squirm. I had no objections. I was ready to see her face when she realized how badly she'd miscalculated. When Ashley showed up at my house, she was wearing that fake smile, the one I had seen countless times before. She tried to act confident, like she had everything under control, but I could see through it. She was nervous. She walked in, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened, and tried to head straight for the bedroom. I stopped her. "Sit down," I said, my voice firm. "We need to talk." "In the dining room," Ashley pouted. "What's wrong, Aaron? Is this really how you want things to end? You've lost me already, haven't you?" But just as she was about to go into her usual spiel, Sandra stepped out from the bedroom, and everything changed. Ashley froze. She stared at Sandra, confusion and then anger flashing across her face. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. Sandra smiled coldly. "Finally, we meet. The woman who's been with my useless husband, Bob. And yes, Ashley, you've lost your right to the bedroom." Ashley's face went from confusion to shock to pure fury. She turned to me. "How could you replace me so easily? After everything we went through? You don't even have the decency to keep it between us? Now you're sleeping with her?" But Sandra wasn't done. "What do you mean? We had debts," she asked, her tone sharp. "Were you involved in embezzling funds too? Were you helping Bob steal money from Aaron's trust fund?" Ashley's eyes widened. The jig was up. She tried to scramble, tried to lie, but it was too late. Sandra already had her confession. "Of course I was," Ashley yelled, her voice cracking. "Do you think Bob could have done it without me? I helped him. He couldn't have pulled this off on his own." Sandra stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom. "You supported him? Helped him ruin everything? You've been lying to everyone, including yourself. And now, you get to face the music." Ashley turned to me, eyes wild with panic. "I don't deserve this. I loved you. I did everything for you. How could you do this to me?" I didn't answer. I just opened the door and told her to leave. "It's over, Ashley," I said, watching as she stormed out, hurling insults at us on her way out. When she was gone, Sandra turned to me with a satisfied smile. "It's done. She won't be back. Not now. Not ever." The next few days felt like a whirlwind. The fallout from Ashley's confession was swift. Sandra sent a recording of everything to Ashley's company, explaining the whole mess and the financial fraud. Ashley was fired on the spot. It didn't take long for Bob to be dragged into the same pit. His reputation was destroyed, and clients were bailing on him left and right. And then Bob, in all his desperation, started calling Sandra. He sent her countless messages, trying to beg for mercy, but she ignored every single one of them. When that didn't work, he showed up drunk at her house in the middle of the night, shouting and hurling insults. Sandra had to call the police to get him to leave, and when she came back inside, it was to find her daughter, Emily, hiding under the bed, terrified. That broke my heart. I stayed with Emily that night, just to make sure she felt safe, but the worst was yet to come. Bob had burned every bridge, and he was about to pay the price. He was facing criminal charges for embezzlement, and Ashley wasn't far behind. Both of them had been living in this bubble of entitlement, thinking they could get away with anything, but now they were trapped in a nightmare of their own making. It's been 7 months since everything started to unravel. The trials have been long, but both Ashley and Bob are facing serious jail time. Their lives are in shambles. Bob's been reduced to a janitor, and Ashley has nothing left, no career, no friends, no future. They're stuck in a world they built for themselves, and it's a far cry from the life they once had. For me, I've started to rebuild. It's not easy, but I'm taking it one step at a time. Sandra has been an incredible support throughout all of this. She's focused on being the best mother she can be for Emily, and I've been trying to be there for both of them as much as I can. But no, we're not together. Not yet, maybe never. Right now, we're just getting through this, one day at a time. As for Ashley and Bob, I don't feel sorry for them. They made their choices. They thought they could outsmart me, take everything, and leave me with nothing. But the truth always comes out. And when it does, the price is steep. That's where things stand now. The chaos has settled, and I'm finally starting to feel like I'm back in control. But I'll never forget what they did. It's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest.